Well, one way to disassemble these has been to use collets, and this is one I made myself. I've got several sets of collets. It's basically just the diameter of the tubes with a slit so that you can tighten them up. And conceptually, you just put a collet on one part, put a collet on another, and you twist them off or unscrew them. In reality, it's not quite that easy, and I've never had much success with this method here of getting things apart. I'll try it one more time here, really crunch down on this guy here, I guess. Yeah, they tend to twist. So I've never, sometimes that works, but in a lot of cases, and particularly this individual regulator is so tight that you can't get it apart with just pressure like that. What I've done in some cases is I have a set of V-blocks here, and I have a vise on the milling machine, a Kurt vise, and I'll put these in there like so, and then use the collets, and this will not turn with these V-blocks on here. It's absolutely holds it right in there without any movement. Sometimes the V-blocks and the collets won't work, and you have to go to some other method. And I have chucks, a 3-jaw chuck here from my metal lathe, and I'll line this with some sort of a shim material to protect the brass here, and I'll tighten this up there, and I'm usually able to get it tight enough to get it started and get it unscrewed. And in fact, before I had these V-blocks, I used to chuck this up in the lathe like so, and then I'd put a second chuck on this end, and I was able to turn them off. The problem is my spindle is threaded, and so for the really, really tight ones, I'd spin my chuck off, and I wouldn't be able to get it apart. So these V-blocks have solved that problem, and I'm going to go ahead here off camera and set it up, and then we'll pull this apart here. So we've got our regulator now. The body is mounted in this is a bench vise here, and you can see we've got it clamped in there pretty good. That's pretty darn tight right there. So we're going to try the collet method and see if we can get this off. Put a collet on that end and clamp it down with a set of vice grips. This is the biggest set I've got. No, not going to come off that way. So we're just spinning on the brass here, so that's not quite going to work. So the other method, and I'll set it up here and we'll get this off, is to set it up with the 3-jaw chuck and see if we can get it off that way. Alright, what we have here is the regulator is set up in the vise in the V-block, so it's held securely. This will not spin. We've got our 3-jaw chuck here, and it's tightened up with some brass shimming here to keep it from marring up the regulator body. And I went ahead and got it started, so it will just start to twist off at this point, and you can see that it's loosening up there. So I'll go ahead and take this back off. Like so. Okay, so the second thing to come out is this here, and I found that if you can, that sometimes the collets will work on just that one part. So we're going to give it a shot here now that this one's loosened, and if you separate them just a little bit and then put this one on it seems to clamp pretty well. So we're going to go ahead and try this one. About okay, so that one broke loose too. Okay, so we've got to get this end off too, where the transfer port, and so we're going to do the same thing. Put a collet on it, tighten it up good with the vice grips. And we got that one broken loose as well. So that's how we get it apart, and we'll put it back on the bench here and continue with the dismantling. Well, we've been talking a little bit about how to get this apart and some of the tools you might need to use. And I showed you some. I showed you the collets, and you know, they work all right. I showed you the V-blocks, which I use in the vise, that really keeps these things nice and tight. But there's also, if you have the ability to make your own tools, there's a couple other things you can do. Well, collets for one, you can make your own collets. And I think the first Super 10 I took apart, I made these little fixture things here, I guess you'd call them. They're tools. And this was to go into the transfer port with this one, like so, and then into the other side with that one. So that gives you a flat surface on each side. You could clamp it down and then take a crescent wrench and adjustable wrench, and you could adjust it. And this worked pretty good, but I was always afraid of tearing up the transfer port here. And you don't want to do that because this is an expensive part here. So I kind of looked at other ways to do something similar, and I ended up with a couple of tools. One of them is for this end. The bottle goes here, and there is this dimple here that when you put it in the gun, the transfer port comes out here. These two are aligned, which is why it's so important to be able to twist it together. And so I made it, you know, I got to thinking about the barrel vices, or action, what do they call them, action vices. And so I made this one, and basically the way it works, you know, if this was in a vise here, and this piece here would fit down through there, and then down into that dimple, and then you can also tighten these up, or action wrench, that's what they call them. And so you tighten these up, and then that gives you just really good, solid, no slip ability to twist this one off. So that works pretty good. The other end, like I say, I don't like to use the transfer port. So I made a little piece here of brass that fits into this groove on this side. So that's kind of how it looks. And again, this was not my doing all of these marks on here, but so it fits in there like so. And then I put I made this wrench here, which goes over that, and then you can tighten this down. It's threaded, and then this is a real good solid way. If this is in the vise, this will either give it that last little bit of tightening you need, or loosening, one or the other. on the valve end. And so, you know, you get to where you're close, you're within an eighth of a turn or a 16th of a turn or something, and these will make that last part, and they don't damage the brass on the regulator body. So if you can make tools, it makes dismantling these kind of things, and not just BSA, but all air guns, it makes it a lot easier to do it. Okay, we're back at the bench. This is, of course, goes here. And at this point, once it's all loosened, you can just take it apart without too much trouble by hand. At this end, there's the valve assembly in there. We looked at that last time, the valve itself here. All right, so that's where we're at right now. On this end, oops, that came out of there unexpectedly. We have the spring, the ball, the housing for it, and the top. There's a little shim on the top of this. It looks like a photo negative. I don't know if anybody nowadays knows what a photo negative looks like, but that's what they look like right there. We're going to try to do this with the collet. And this usually isn't so tight, but just a screwdriver in there, break that one open. I mentioned earlier in another video that this will oftentimes be pressurized, and what will happen is that the air, the high pressure air within the firing chamber here will get in here and it'll seep behind those O-rings on the piston in here. And so over time this will become pressurized, and when you take it off, it'll tend to fly. And so what I've done is I put this up in my 3-jaw chuck here in my lathe, and then I'll take the tailstock and I'll mount this like so, and then when I take it off, when it flies, it can't go very far. It'll just slide into the tailstock chuck. So that's one way to do it. There may be others, but that seems to work pretty well. So we take this off. There's our plunger again, some shims on it. On this end.